Can we start with your fourth pregnancy? Was it a planned pregnancy? How did it start?
So the fourth pregnancy was not planned at all. I actually had an IUD in at the time.
So what is it?
The copper spiral.
Oh.
It's like a birth control method, right? So I had that in, and I got that put in February 2020. So right before the pandemic hit. And I thought, well, that's lucky. I have my, birth control. I'm good to go for 5 years really with this. And then in September, I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, that's not supposed to happen. I have an IUD. And my youngest at the time, he would have been not even a year old yet at that point. And that's what happened with my last pregnancy. Before that, the youngest was 8 months old. And I got pregnant with my son, and so he was the third pregnancy. I wasn't planning on getting pregnant a fourth time. The third time was also a surprise. So this is like the second time that this has happened.
But wait, can we just quickly
okay,
go
we'll
back?
go,
The
just
third
a recap.
time, what happened the third time? How was it?
So I had my first daughter in 2015, and then 2.5 years later, I had the second one. And I thought, okay, 2.5 years is good spacing. I like that because the oldest one could do a little bit by herself at 2.5, and the baby was the baby. But then when the second one was 8 months old, I got pregnant with the third one, and we weren't planning on that. I was thinking maybe someday I'll have a third child, and then it happened. And I'd gone on keto, like this diet, and I'd lost a bunch of weight, and I think it kind of like put my hormones kind of out of whack. And because otherwise I was always following my cycle and making sure to use my cycle to make sure I couldn't get pregnant. And then, I was wrong about my cycle. Anyway, since we were pregnant, we were having him, and I thought, okay, well, we're done now. We're definitely having this last one, and we're really done. And that's why I had the IUD put in, because I thought I'm not going to want any more kids.
Because that method didn't work, so...
Yeah, so I thought, okay, IUD, that'll be good. And then that didn't work either. So now I'm like, now what do I do? I think the answer is just vasectomy is what needs to happen now, but we still haven't done that yet.
Yes. Both of you, or?
I don't think I would get a hysterectomy. I mean, I would be willing to, except that it's more expensive and it's more invasive, of course. And I feel like I've done a lot already. I've done all the pregnancies and all the births. It's like, maybe it's his turn.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my reasoning is that I don't think I really need to be the one to do that. But
okay,
anyway.
So now we learned that you're pregnant. It's a surprise pregnancy. Your baby is just around 1 year old. Mm-hmm. You're still, healing and getting back to more or less normal. Yeah. What were the thoughts?
Well, I just remember my husband and I had this one conversation that was really intense, where he was definitely like, we really need to consider having an abortion, because it's going to be a huge strain. He was in school too, so he had just started this program. Like the year before, he was 1 year into this program. He was worried he was going to fail the program and lose, have to quit or whatever. And and I had, the 3 other ones who were at the time, I guess, 4 years old, and 2 and 1. Yeah. So I had a bunch of children at home already, and I didn't feel like I needed any more at the time. So I went to the counseling. You have to take a counseling here in Germany before you can get an abortion. So I went to that, and the lady was really nice and explained all my options to me. And then I went home, and I had all the information. I had the piece of paper that says I was allowed to go get an abortion if I wanted, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself. I was so worried that afterwards, I just hate myself and be so upset and regret what I'd done, but I couldn't take it back because it was so final, So it was a really hard time for me, because my husband was like, we really should do it. It's better for all of us. And I'm like, no, I don't think it's better for me, Yeah. But it might have been better, less stressful for him and less stressful for the others. But.
Yeah. So you mentioned that when you were at the abortion clinic, and just for context, we're in Berlin, and it's legal, right, to get an abortion. But you just mentioned that you got a paper that you were allowed to get an abortion. Is there cases, do you think, that when someone is not allowed? And who decides that?
I don't think it's that. I think it's just you have to get this mandatory counseling, and that piece of paper is the stamp on it says yes, the counseling has been done. Yeah, just
no matter what you decide, you can still get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
now, okay, so then you decide to keep the baby, right?
Yeah. So I decided, and ultimately my husband was like, it's your choice. You know, I think we should terminate the pregnancy. And I was like, no, I don't think I can do it. I just don't think I can't imagine doing that. And so, yeah, so we kept the baby. Throughout the pregnancy, I was kind of like, oh, like, I kind of feel, you know, like friends and family are like, can't she figure out birth control? Like, what's wrong with this, with this woman that she just keeps on having kids, you know? But I don't know. In the end, it was good. Like, it was a really easy pregnancy, no complications, no gestational diabetes, nothing. Like, it was just very, I wouldn't say easy, because like I felt with each pregnancy, I would get bigger faster, and like the hard part of pregnancy would always come a bit sooner, like, you know, towards the end when you're just like super huge and you feel like you can't walk anywhere. I felt like that part would always come a little bit sooner with every pregnancy. And then I planned a home birth because I'd had home births with the previous two. And I had the same midwife, so I just, you know, it was great because at that point I had her on WhatsApp. I could just write her and say, hey, I'm pregnant again. And she was like, oh, okay, great. Let's do this, you know. And so she and I worked really well together. And so that was really good that I had her, and I had a doula that I also called and set up an appointment with. And so that was great to have my doula back on board. And yeah, the birth went so fast the night of the birth that only the doula made it. It was, we called the midwife, my husband called her, but I think he looked on the phone log later, it was like 22 minutes between the time he called her and the time she arrived. And in that time, the baby was born. So,
okay, wait, let's go back. So now when does your labor start? Is it on due date, earlier or later?
Later. It was 5 days after the due date. So.
Oh, interesting. Are you, all of you kids were late, or?
And my first was 3 days early, or 2 days, I think 3 days, and then the others were all a little bit late.
Okay.
Kind of the reverse of what I guess usually happens. Usually it's the other way around.
Right. Okay.
My third was the longest. He was there. He almost was 2 weeks late, and if he'd come the next day, like I wouldn't have been able to do a home birth.
Home birth, yeah, I remember.
So, yeah, exactly. But luckily, yeah.
Okay, so now you're 5 days past your due date, and then.
So it wasn't like enough yet to panic, but I was definitely, you know, feeling like,
again.
Yeah, I'm tired and I want this, you know, I want to get this over with. She was due on the 4th of July, and then she came on the 9th of July. So yeah, it wasn't late enough to panic or start like doing these midwife tricks, you know, to try to get the baby to come out. Like because with my son, I'd had all the tricks, like the drinking of this like special cocktail that my midwife made me. Yeah, enemas, like all these different like tricks, and I was like, oh, I don't want to have to do all that again. But luckily, I just went into labor naturally.
How did the labor contractions begin?
I just felt kind of like weird and crampy and like not very good, and I was lying in bed trying to put the older two girls to sleep. And I just couldn't get comfortable, and I was irritated. And finally, we all got back out of bed, and their dad had put our son to sleep already. So our son was asleep, and so I was like, I need to go on a walk or something. Can you put the girls to bed? And so he took over bedtime, and I went out and went on a little walk around the neighborhood. And I remember it had been hot out like all that week because it was July, but that day it had rained in the morning, so it was kind of like cool and starting. You know how like it starts to heat up a little bit again. It feels kind of like almost like a jungle after the rain. So yeah, it was that kind of weather where it was a bit. It luckily was cooler, but it was like starting to get a little bit muggy again. Yeah, humid. So I was walking around. I came home at like 10 p.m. and it was just starting to get dark out, like because it was summer. And yeah, and then it was 10 p.m. when I got home. I sat down on the couch. I was watching something on Netflix, and I could feel like my like icky cramping sensations starting to get, you know, more. And by 11 o'clock, I was in full labor. So it took like an hour from, you know, having these kind of like, I don't really feel good, and like realizing I was having cramps.
Did you feel like cramps?
Yeah, I must have. I think on my walk, I was starting to feel like, but I wasn't having like full blown like stop and labor cramps. I just felt like small.
Were they coming and going, or were they?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember exactly.
Did you think that you were gonna give birth?
See, that's the thing, is that when I had my second, since it was my first home birth, and I like the first birth had gone so quickly, I was like, well, this will be like nothing. And so when I first started feeling contractions, like, okay, it's coming, here it is, and then it ended up being the longest birth out of all of them. So after that, with my third and fourth births, I just remembered I need to calm down and like not get too excited, because if I feel like I'm having contractions, I mean, it could be that I give birth in an hour or two, or it could be a day or two. Like, I just need to like calm down and rest, and like I'm not going to miss the birth, right? It's going to happen and I'm going to be there, but I don't need to like worry, just kind of relax. So yeah, I didn't really know, but I was like, well, yeah, I'm feeling some contractions, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to have the baby right away. But in this case, it did mean that, because by 11 o'clock, I was really like having full on rolling contractions.
So it just was like started kind of slow, and then you were watching something, and then all of a sudden, did you feel like it was like quite sudden?
They built up, but it wasn't sudden, but like it just all sped up really, really quickly, I guess. Like each contraction was a bit more, and then at some point I couldn't sit through them. I had to get up and walk around each time.
When did you decide to call your...
I think it was probably like shortly after 11 o'clock, or maybe 11:30. Yeah, I think 11:30, because it took about 45 minutes for the doula to arrive. And when our doula arrived, then that was around 12:45, and the baby was born at like 1.
All right, in 15. Okay, after 15 minutes, once your doula came.
Pretty much, yeah.
But it's with doula doesn't really help with the birth itself,
no,
right?
Really.
So she was there for emotional support, and you called your midwife, but she wasn't there. Was the pool ready?
The pool was ready. Yeah, my husband had taken care of that, so he had already filled up the pool.
When did you pull it? When did you fill it up?
I guess
same day.
Yeah, it was that day. I think he must have done it after the kids were all in bed.
Did you tell him to do that?
Yeah,
or was
I told
he
him
like
to
intuition?
do it.
Oh, okay.
No, I told him. I was like, now would be a good time to fill up the pool. Yeah. And luckily he did.
Do you usually fill it up? Does it have to be like fresh water? Do you fill it up on the same day? But how do you know? But what if like you don't have enough time, because it takes time to fill the pool?
Yeah, we kind of like filled it up part way, and then like with kind of warm water, and then you can like add more hot water if you feel like it's getting too cold. We just kind of did it like that.
Right.
But there wasn't really enough time. He timed it really well, because he did put water in, and then when the birth happened, it was so fast that like I was lucky that I even got
experienced home birth, right?
Yeah.
So before that, you had 2 or 1 home birth?
2.
So 2. This would be your third.
Yeah. Exactly.
And okay, so how old were you when you had your first home birth?
How old was I when I did the first home birth? I would have been 34, I think.
And then when you had your last, 37 or 36?
I guess 36. Yeah.
And do they allow like?
The first one was 33 then, I guess.
Yeah. Is there any age restrictions for having home births?
I don't think so. I mean, there must be some cutoff at some point, but I don't know what it is. Like, they don't let like 45-year-old people do it, I guess. I think the main things is you have to have like they just monitor you really closely and make sure that your iron levels are really high, or like not low, I guess. That you don't have gestational diabetes, because you can't do it if you've got that. Yeah, so there's a couple different parameters that you have to meet to be able to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, so now it's your doula is there. You're already in the pool.
I wasn't in the pool yet when Jem got there. I was I was near the pool. The pool was in the living room, and I was kind of on the couch. And then every time I had a contraction, I had to get up. And again, since it was my 4th time doing this, I knew that I had to stay in front of the contractions. I couldn't let them like take over me. I had to like be out in front of it. So whenever I just start to feel like a little bit, I was like, oh, here comes the next one. Got to get up, got to get moving. And I had this kind of just routine where I just like had to basically move all my arms and legs and like just kind of go nuts for like a minute, almost like a drug trip almost. Another thing I really liked was hanging. So like we had doors with like a tiny little like thing where you can like kind of put your fingers up, and so I was like putting my fingers up on top of the door frame and just hanging from them during the height of the contraction. So I was doing all of that with Jem around as well, our doula, and yeah, it was, I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it, but like that's what I had to do for every contraction, was just get up and just be able to like move freely and vocalize freely and do whatever felt good to like counteract the pain of the contraction.
Yeah. So one thing that I would be afraid of home birth is, I remember both of my births, I was screaming so bad.
Yeah.
Like, how I don't think I would feel comfortable if I were in my apartment to scream that way, but I think I wouldn't be able to stop myself, and then I would be feeling like, what about, like, for neighbors, how did you?
Well, with the first home birth, I definitely had those thoughts of like, oh, it's like 5 a.m, my poor neighbors. But then I talked to a couple of them after, and some of them were like, oh, hey, the baby's here. So they hadn't even heard it. Well, they saw me with the baby, and they, like, if they'd heard it, they would have been like, yeah, I know the baby's there because I heard you last night. But they were like, oh, totally surprised. So they hadn't heard it. The only lady who heard it lived right above us. And she was like, it doesn't happen very often. It's like once or twice in a lifetime, So she was like, you're not going to do that every day. I know it's okay, So she really didn't mind. So, like, no one else seemed to mind or care or even hear it. So.
I think it'd be a good idea also, like, if someone is thinking about home birth, is, when your neighbors plan a party, they give you like a sign. So maybe one of those, like, hang out, like, I'm having a home birth.
I did do that. I put a sign up for one of the births. I forget. I think it was, I think I did put a sign up. I think by the fourth, it was the third home birth. They were used to me by now. So no one
as soon as they saw you pregnant, they're like, oh,
yeah,
home birth is
here
coming.
It comes again.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay, so do you know, like, when you're going to give birth? So do you have any feelings? How do you know that you need to get ready? Your midwife is not there?
Well, I wasn't panicking because I knew that Vanessa was on her way. So I knew that she'd get there eventually. So even if she didn't make it for the birth, she would be there shortly thereafter. And that's exactly what happened. She made it about 10 minutes after. But I didn't know, like, Vanessa had said too, she's like, it's going to happen really fast. And I'm like, yeah, probably. But I also don't want to call you, too soon, because what if it doesn't happen fast and then you come.
Middle of the night.
And she's like, don't worry, just, that's my job. I want to be here for the birth. I want to be there for you. I said, okay, And so I did give my husband the go-ahead to call her. And by that point, like, he needed her, well, he also needed our babysitter there, because our babysitter was going to come over and help him with the girls so that she could watch the girls, and because they had actually woken up by that point. So he was in the back room with the girls. And I think that was the most stressful part for him, was that he was trying to support me, but then also the girls were awake and he didn't want to bring them into the living room because they didn't want to come, because they were hearing me scream and they were like not really into that. They were completely freaked out by the screaming. So they're like, we don't want to go in there. We don't want to see mom scream. So he just hung out in the back with them. And then he realized at some point that I wasn't screaming anymore. And all of that happened really, really quickly, because Jem was there, the doula, right? And they were helping me with the contractions. And I maybe had like 3 contractions with Jem or so. And then there was one contraction where in the middle of it, I realized that I had transitioned from, early labor or whatever to like the pushing labor. And I could feel that in the contraction started off, at least this was my perception of it, but it started off as like a cervix widening contraction. And then it ended in this pushing. And I was like, oh no, whoa. Like, I'm already pushing. And I told that to Jem, and Jem was like, well, you got to get in the pool. And I was like, okay. And so Jem was helping me get I was wearing like these basketball shorts. And so Jem was helping me get out of those. And then I said, wait, no, another contraction. We got to wait until after this contraction and then we can continue with the shorts. So I got through that contraction. And I think then I had one more contraction, I think where I was halfway in the pool. I got one leg in and then I had to go through another contraction. And then finally I was in the pool after those 2 contractions. And by then I like felt down to see where the head was. And the head was already crowning. Like the baby was already, and it was only like 2.5 pushing contractions. And I was just like, whoa, the baby's already almost out, And I always love that point in birth, because it's just, you're so close to the end of the labor, and you're just like, oh, just a few more pushes. I can do it. I can get through these, these unmedicated
I just feel like I want to cry.
I know, it's so crazy. I felt like she just shot out of me like a rocket, because like I think it was maybe one more push and her head was out, And then one more push and her body was out, and that was it. And it was just like...
And so you're alone in the pool.
I was in the pool.
Like, do you feel like, oh, what am I gonna do now? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, I didn't have any like panicky thoughts. I was always just relieved that I didn't have to do any more contractions. I mean, obviously there's the contractions for getting the placenta out after, but they're not as bad, I don't find, as the birth contractions. So I didn't panic, and I had Jem there, and Jem's really experienced, and I had no panicky thoughts at all. I was just like, baby came out, I like just guided her up, and then she was there, and I was like, oh, hey. And like she had hair. All my other babies had no hair at birth, and she had like nice, like pretty long hair, and I was like, oh, hello. And then I just put her on my chest, and we like covered her up with like, towels. And then after a few minutes, Jem was like, we should get you out of the pool and over to the couch just in case like you're experiencing blood loss. And when your midwife gets here, she can check for all of that. And so Jem helped me out of the pool, and me and the baby and the placenta. Like the placenta was still inside, I think, of me.
Did you cut the cord already in the pool? Or?
No, we waited till the midwife got there. Waited till the midwife got there. So I just carried the baby.
Like a limit time that you have to like do it on time, otherwise the blood goes back to something?
I don't know. I've heard different things. Some people say they want to like wait till the cord has stopped pulsing.
Yeah. But it's okay to...
I've heard, I mean, I've known of people who've done what they call a lotus birth, where they birth the baby and they birth the placenta, and then they wait for the placenta, like the cord, to naturally dry up and just fall off. Which means you're like carrying a baby around that's connected to a placenta for like 2 or 3 days.
I'm thinking this is how our ancestors did before they came up with scissors, right?
Probably. I mean, I assume so. But I cut the cord. So when our midwife came, then she like prepared everything and checked everything, and then she had me cut the cord. I cut all 4.
When it's...
No.
Okay. So now you have your baby on your chest, and do you try breastfeeding right away?
I don't remember now. I mean, I think we did on the couch, and I think she did latch on.
What did your midwife say though? Did she say it's for the first time this happened? Like,
no, she didn't really ever talk about like other things. Like she tries to like focus on the case at hand, and she doesn't tell stories of other people's births usually. But yeah, she just walked in and was like, oh, doesn't seem like there's a birth going on here. Is the baby already there? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, oh, okay. And like, it was really cool because I think some midwives probably might get a little irritated if you call them too late and then they miss the birth, because like that's kind of what they're there for. They kind of want to, their whole passion is to like watch babies be born, right?
Sure, but also you cannot keep the baby in.
Yeah, I know, but like to be there in the moment, I think they would like to like actually watch the birth happen. She showed up at the same time as our babysitter, actually, the babysitter who was supposed to be there for our girls. So like it was good that they were both there, and they were both helpful, but like, yeah, they should have been there during the birth. But for me, honestly, like I was happy to just have for what I considered to be the only necessary people, which was my husband, because he had to take care of the girls and call like the different people, and Jem, because like Jem was at all my births. Actually, it wasn't at the second one.
This is your midwife or doula?
The doula, yeah.
So now you have already had 2 different experiences, one at the hospital with your first child, and then the rest of them at home. Yeah. You had home birth. So what's the reason you decided to go for this option? And since you had both experiences, can you compare them?
Yeah. Well, when I was pregnant with my first, I wanted to do a home birth, but my husband wasn't comfortable with the idea because he was worried that something would go wrong. And since we had no experience with birthing at all, he was like, it's better if we do it at a hospital. And I said, okay. Also, I didn't realize that like you need to sign up and get your midwife immediately in Berlin. So I was also too late once I finally started looking for a midwife to actually get a home birth midwife. So there was no chance really. And so I just kind of like let that go. Yeah, and so we picked a hospital that was close to our house, but had like a good reputation and seemed more like, I don't know, not as like hospital-y. Do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't as clinical as it would have been to go to like Charité, for example. So it was smaller, and it was not as many beds, and they allowed water birth, which I was really interested in doing. And yeah, so I just decided that would be good. Then when it actually came to the birth, it went pretty fast, not as fast as my 3rd and 4th births, But it went fast enough where I thought, oh man, now I wish I would have done a home birth, because now I'd stayed home so long through the labor that I could barely like get dressed in time to get out the house. And my husband had called like the ride service. It was like this kind of ambulance type thing. And they couldn't find our house. They were like, they came really late and they were like, we don't know where you are. And my husband's like, I gave you the address. It's not complicated. We're like the first apartment in the building. It's not a complicated thing, but like they were really dumb. And then so having to deal with these like dumb drivers that didn't know where we lived was a source of annoyance. So, and I feel like it disrupted the flow of my birth. So, and then of course, once you birth a baby in the hospital, then you have to make all these decisions like, okay, are we going to go home right after the birth, or am I going to stay here? If you're staying in the hospital and you don't get the family room, then your husband has to, go home. Yeah, my husband couldn't stay overnight because obviously he wanted to be with us, but it wasn't that bad. He came and stayed most of the day with me, and then he would go home. Like the nurses would like kick him out at like 9 or 9:30. They'd be like, you've been here long enough. You need to go home now. But then it was the nights that were the hardest because, the baby, like my oldest, she was awake a lot in the night, and I couldn't get her, like I was new at breastfeeding, so I didn't know how to get her to latch on properly. And the night nurses weren't helpful at all. And so luckily I have a cousin who lives in the US who is a lactation consultant. So I was able to like text her at night and be like, what am I supposed to be doing? I don't know what I'm doing. So she was really helpful because it was daytime for her there, right? And then what really bugged me about being in the hospital was like the food was pretty terrible. And also the people would like come in at all hours and, like specialists or like the physiotherapist or anyone would come into the room and be like, Frau Linnenkohl, and they'd like want to talk to me, and I'm like, I just want to sleep. Please just leave me alone. I don't want to talk to anyone. But they had to come and ask you questions or have you fill out a form, or like the baby had to do the U2 or whatever. Yeah. So they had these different things going on, and you just had to kind of like follow their schedule. And so I didn't like that very much. Yeah. Whereas, of course, at home, you don't have anyone like doing that. You just can do whatever you want. You're in your own bed, you're in your own room. And if you have a good midwife, like I did, the midwife takes care of like kind of all the logistics and kind of just runs in the background doing the stuff. So she like pumped the pool out, like got rid of all the water and like folded the pool back down, took it back out to her car, filled out all the paperwork that I would need to be able to get the birth certificate. She had a whole process because she does this for a living, right? And so she's really like got a step-by-step protocol that she follows, and it's really good. So, and
home birth is also for midwives services is paid by insurance?
It is. They're allowed to charge like an on-call fee as well. Uh-huh. And that has gotten really expensive in previous years. It used to be like 150 or 200 euros. And like now I've heard of people getting charged like 600 euros for that.
For what exactly?
Just like on-call fee, like it's called a Rufsbereitschaftspauschale. Uh-huh. Just a fee for being on call.
But it's paid by insurance.
Yeah, all of their services are paid for by insurance, but they're allowed to charge this extra fee for being an on-call midwife.
So. Right, but the water birth at home is covered by insurance.
More or less, yeah. Like they pay for everything except for the pool itself. Like you have to somehow rent the pool. But my midwife offered that as just part of her service. She owns the pool and would bring it with her to the different births. You had to buy the cover though for the pool because each birth has to have its own kind of like a condom type of cover over the pool to just sanitary reasons, just to keep it sanitary. And that was 50 euros. So you had to buy one of those and then throw it away at the end, and that was that. But those are the only costs really. And sometimes if you have a good insurance, they will pay like all of the fee or at least half of it, but my insurance wouldn't do that.
Oh, so you had to pay for it yourself.
Yeah.
And it was still worth it to...
Oh yeah, I would have. Yeah, I definitely would. I mean, there's just something so nice about like once the birth has finally happened, the baby's out, and you can just take your baby and go lie down in your own bed and just sleep, And you don't have that in a hospital necessarily.
Yeah.
Like I remember at the first birth, like they let us have that first hour together as a family, the golden hour, just kind of cuddling. But then they're like, all right, chop, chop, like time to get you moved down to the, the what's it called? The hallway, like the ward where the new mothers are. And they put me in like a wheelchair and wheeled me down there. And they were like, nope, you have to go pee first. And one of the nurses, I was like, I can't pee, I really can't, it hurts. And the nurse is like, I'm not taking you down there till you pee, you know, just kind of like really matter of fact, like you have to pee, because I just had a lady like pee everywhere and I don't want to have to clean that up. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I have to pee then, you know. And like more pressure made it harder for me to pee, you know, so it wasn't helping. Whereas at home, there was no pressure. Like Vanessa, it was part of Vanessa's plan though. She's like, okay, now is the time where I need to ask the woman if she needs to go pee and try to help her to the bathroom, you know. So it was part of the step-by-step plan, but there was no pressure. Like if I couldn't do it, then she
pleasant,
more familiar.
And it's such a important time. It's such a bonding, you know, time, and you want to be with your baby, no stress, relaxed, because I think it's so important. But are there any cons for giving birth at home?
I guess if you have like some sort of complication, then that would be the main thing. And also, if you decide in the birth, like during the birth, that you would like pain medication, you obviously can't get that.
No epidurals.
No.
But like, can you get? Is there anything else other than epidural?
You could probably get like one of these like TENS machines with like the electrical stimulation. But I didn't have that.
So you cannot get any pain management if you're giving birth at home.
No.
If it's natural, it's all the way.
But other than that, I wouldn't say there's that many cons. And I'm actually really surprised that there's not more home births. I think it's just mostly because it's really expensive to be a home birth midwife at this time, because insurances have increased their premiums so much that it doesn't make any sense for midwives to actually attend births anymore.
Is it good or is it bad?
It's bad. It's the midwife who is the practicing midwife has to pay to the insurance every year, like an annual fee. Okay. And that fee has just gone up and up and up. So like basically they have to do, you know, however many births just to pay the insurance fee, and then they can make money. You know what I mean? Like
that. Okay.
It's like thousands of euros every year. I don't know the exact number. But...
Is it like insurance in case something goes wrong?
Yeah, malpractice.
Okay.
So they don't, you know.
So if you want to do it, you have to pay out of pocket.
Which is why so many midwives now like they just do like pre-birth and post-birth, or they do like Rückbildung, you know, the courses for postpartum, but they don't attend births anymore.
So what is your advice for someone who's contemplating about having home birth but haven't decided yet?
I mean, I would say, go for it and find a home birth midwife right away, like as soon as possible, especially in Berlin. But if you're not in Berlin, like, find someone who can guide you through the whole thing, even if, you know, you don't meet them every like week or whatever, but at the beginning, you're going to meet them once, and then maybe a couple months later, but they're there for like questions, and they guide you through the process. And I think it's just cool to have someone that's there pretty much every step of the way, right? That knows you from the beginning of the pregnancy to the end and beyond. And I think it's totally, I think I would do it again. Like if I ever, hopefully I'm not going to have any more pregnancies, but I would do it again.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much. I think it was very insightful. Thank you.